Okay, so let's continue with our next video in practice exam questions for AWS Certified Developer Associate exam. So let's see question number 41. A developer is building a web application that uses Amazon API Gateway to expose an AWS Lambda function to process requests from clients. So there is a web application which is using API Gateway, and behind the API Gateway we have the Lambda function, and the Lambda function is like basically doing all kind of work. During the testing, the developer noted that the API gateway times out even though the Lambda function finishes under the set time limit. Because Lambda function is behind the API gateway, even though the Lambda function finishes within the time limit, but API gateway get timeout. So which of the following API gateway metrics in Amazon CloudWatch can help the developer troubleshoot the issue? So we need to choose two. Cache hit count wrong, because in the question nowhere it is mentioned like you have enabled the cache on the API gateway and you are trying to read from the cache. No, so it's wrong. Integration latency, yes, it is something related to the latency, like you are not getting the response within a time. So yes, a cache, again wrong. Nothing is mentioned in the question like you are using cache. Latency, yes. Count, no. Count will tell you how many number of requests is coming, but it is not going to help in debugging why you are getting that timeout. But basically the latency is going to tell you how much time it is taking. So because we need to choose two, so B and D will be the correct answer. Question number 42. A development team wants to build a continuous integration CI/CD pipeline. Basically, the team is using code pipeline to automate the code build and deployment. So within the code pipeline, you have the code build step and the deploy step. The team wants to store the code into store the code to prepare for the CI/CD pipeline. Because when you run the build, so build should be run on some code. So where the code should be stored? So the code should be stored in our code commit, similar to our GitHub. So AWS provide a repository where you can commit your codes and or you can store your code. It's not Artifactory, it's not deploy, it's not code guru, it's code commit. Question number 43. A developer is designing an AWS Lambda function that creates temporary files that are less than 10 MB during invocation. So Lambda is running, but when the Lambda runs, it generates some temporary files. The temporary file will be accessed and modified during multiple times during invocation. So basically, maybe you have like a Lambda function. In the first line, the files get generated. In after maybe 10 lines, again the same files, the generated files were used. Again after 10 lines, same files will be used. Basically, these files are being used within the same invocation, but multiple times. The developer has no need to save or retrieve these files in the future. So they don't need these files in the future. So where should the temporary file be stored? Because you are creating the file, so it should be stored somewhere. So where you should store, and we don't need for the future purpose. So when you create a Lambda, in the Lambda provides a temporary directory with /temp. And if you need to store temporary files, you can just store the files into the /temp directory. You don't need to store EFS, EBS, S3 because you don't need to retrieve in the future. So temp is the correct answer. Question number 44. A developer is designing a serverless application with two AWS Lambda function to process photo. So you have two AWS Lambda function, right? Lambda function, one Lambda function stores object in S3 bucket and store the associated metadata in DynamoDB. So there is one Lambda function which store the object into S3 bucket and related metadata into DynamoDB. The other Lambda function uh, get the object from S3 bucket using the metadata from the DynamoDB table. So one is storing the object in S3 and metadata, other is reading the metadata and corresponding to the metadata, reading the or like photos from the S3 bucket. Both Lambda function are using same Python library to perform complex computation and approaching the quota for the maximum size. So whenever like you could see, because whenever you upload the Lambda, so there is a size limit, the zip size limit and the other size limit. So what you can do, because you are using two Lambda function, and both the lambda function you're using the same library. All right. So what you can do is you can remove these libraries and create a lambda layers and import the lambda layers, by which the lambda size will be decreased, because the issue is the size of our package. So what should the developer do? Basically the layers. Let's read if we have any option. Package each Python library in own.zip file. Deploy each lambda function its own copy of library. No, no, zip. We already doing the zip, and zip is also creating the issue. So zip is not a solution. Create a lambda layer. Definitely yes. Use the lambda layer in both lambda function, because we are using the same library. So no need to install the library multiple times like in both the lambda function. Basically, we can create a lambda layer. Create Combine the two lambda function. No. Download the Python library to an S3 bucket. No, lambda layer is the correct answer. Question number 45. A developer is writing an AWS Lambda function. The developer wants to log key events that occur when the Lambda function runs. So they want to log something when the Lambda function is triggered. The developer wants to include a unique identifier to associate with the event with the specific function invocation. So basically, let's suppose you called Lambda 10 times. So all the 10 times there is some unique identifier like, and they that want to log. So the developer want to add the following code. So which solution will meet the requirement? So whenever, okay, let's read the options. Obtain the request identifier from the AWS request ID field in the context object. Correct. Configure the application to write, definitely correct, because you have two options, event and context. Event is something which you are going to pass, or it is going to pass by some other AWS service. Context is like some variable like context dot AWS request ID, which is basically the unique identifier ID, and many other parameters you can get. Uh, and we want the unique identifier so that you can log using print statement or logging module, right? So you can retrieve that uh, unique identifier from the context variable, and then you can log it. Obtain the identifier from the event object, totally wrong. Obtain the identifier from the event object, wrong. Obtain the identifier from the context object, correct. Configure an application to write to a file. No, you don't need to write to a file. You can just write to the output, standard output, that is just console.log. Oh, sorry, not console.log, just print or something if you are writing in Python. So A is the correct answer. Question number 46. A developer is working on a serverless application that needs to process any change to an Amazon DynamoDB table with an AWS Lambda function. How should the developer configure the Lambda function to detect changes into the DynamoDB table? So they said uh, a developer is working on a serverless application that need to process any change. So you have the DynamoDB table, you have the Lambda function. Whenever any changes occur in the DynamoDB table, like when you insert any record, delete any record, anything, or update any record, anything has been occurred, you have to trigger the lambda function. So how should you do? So there is a concept called DynamoDB streams. So you can create a stream, and within the stream, basically there are some settings. As an example, which events you want to log into the stream, like just the new events or deleted events or update events or all the events. So you can do that setting based upon your requirement, and with the stream you can attach the lambda function, uh, which is going to be trigger. So let's read. Create an kinesis data stream. No. Create an event bridge rule to invoke the lambda function to regular schedule. No. Enable DynamoDB stream. Yes, DynamoDB stream is the only option, correct option. Create a trigger to connect the DynamoDB stream to the Lambda function. Yes, so the stream, if we just create a stream, that is going to log, but we have to trigger the Lambda. So you have to connect the stream with the Lambda. Create a Amazon Kinesis firehouse delivery system. No, so C is the correct answer. Question number 47. An application uses an Amazon EC2 auto scaling group. So they're using EC2. The developer noticed that EC2 instances are taking a long time to become available during scale out. Scale out means when there is a huge demand, so more EC2 instance needs to be spin up. But the developer notice when EC2 was getting spin up or it is taking long time to get available. The user data script is taking a long time to run. All right, so user data script is also taking a long time. The developer must implement a solution, okay, to decrease the time elapsed before an EC2 instance become available. So this is the issue because EC2 instance is taking a long time, and if it is taking a long time, maybe some transition will get timeout because there is a huge demand, and one EC2 can't handle all the demands. So we have to solve this problem. So basically, what the problem is taking long time, and we need to decrease this time. The solution must take the most recent version of the application available at all times and must apply all available security updates. So you can't skip the security updates and you have to take the latest version. The solution also must minimize the number of images that are created. So you have to also take care of this. The images must be validated. Which combination of steps should the developer to meet this requirement choose to? So use an EC2 image builder to create an AMI, install all the patches and agents that are needed to manage and run the application, update the auto-scaling group to configure to use the AMI. Yeah, that can be the option. If you create an AMI and within that AMI you can install all the patches and agents and everything. All right, and you can use that AMI to launch your EC2 instance. Then that is going to solve this problem. Like it has like whenever an EC2 has been started, so all the security updates already available. So new security updates is not going to be installed every time, right? So EC2 will take less time to spin up, right? So A can be the option. Use EC2 image builder to create an AMI, install the latest version of the application and all the so it says like within the AMI you can install the application version. If you do this, what will happen? Whenever whenever application code has been changes, you need to create an AMI. So if you create a more and more and more and more AMI, the more number of AMI is going to create. But the question said the solution should minimize the number of image. So B will be wrong. Set up AWS code deploy to deploy the most recent version of the application. This can be the answer because it is mentioned you have to take a latest version of the application. Use the code pipeline. No, code pipeline we don't need. Remove any commands that perform operating system patching from the user data script. Now you can say this can also be the answer because we already installed all the patches here. All right, but there could be some patches which are not here, and if you are going to remove from the user data script, then this is not going to meet this requirement like must apply all security update. This can be the answer E also, but looks A and C because you have to take the latest version of the application. So A and C looks correct. Let's reveal the solution. So A and C looks correct, but most of the people also say A and E. A is definitely correct, but there is some confusion between C and E uh, be- uh, because here you mentioned like install all the patches and like everything here, and similarly if you already installed here, it's better to remove from the user data script. All right, but I believe like there may be some patches which is not there. Or like let's suppose if we use A and E, then what about uh, the line which mention you have to take the most recent version of the application at all times? How you are going to take the most recent version until unless you are not going to do the deployment, right? So this is going to, if A and E most like look same, but C is also required. So if it has three option, then A, C, E. But if two, then I will prefer A and C. Question number 48. The developer is creating an AWS Lambda function that needs credentials to connect to an RDS for MySQL database. So Lambda function needs credential that needs to connect to the database. An Amazon S3 bucket currently stores credential. Totally wrong. Early S3 bucket should not store. The developer need to improve the solution. Okay. and implement credential rotation. Okay, so ideally the where the credentials should store in the into the secrets manager or SSM parameter, but if the credential need to be rotate, then the secrets manager, because SSM don't support rotation. The developer also needs to provide integration with the Lambda function, which is fine. Which solution should the developer use? I think on the secret manager. Let's see if we have any secret manager. So SSM parameter you can use, but it don't provide rotation. A KMS key, no. Secret manager, yes. Store the credential in AWS secret. So I am just reading the half of the option just to eliminate. Encrypt the credential using KMS. No. So C looks the correct answer, and store the credential in DynamoDB table, wrong. Store the credential into the RDS table, totally wrong. Like store the credential in environment variable, wrong. So C is the correct answer. A developer has written the following IAM policy to provide access to an Amazon S3 bucket. So this is the policy. What this policy say? You have the allow access, you have the deny access. So allow action, only two type of action allow, or get and put object. On which bucket? On doc example bucket, and within the bucket, all the resources star. Along with this, you have the deny a permission of the remaining, or you can say all operation. Deny on all S3 operation, but on which resource? If within the bucket, if there is any file or any object start with secrets, right? So what this policy donate? Access on the bucket except the this bucket, totally wrong. Access on all buckets that start with doc example bucket, okay, except the secrets bucket. No, this is not a bucket, this is object. Access on all objects on the doc example bucket, yes, along with access to all S3 actions for object in bucket that start with secret. No, we have the deny operation. Access on all objects in doc example bucket except the one which start with the secrets. Yes. So D is the correct answer. Question number 50. The developer is creating a mobile app that calls a backend service by using API gateway REST API, right? For integration testing during the development phase, the developer want to simulate different backend response without invoking the backend service. So your API is calling some backend service, but they are just doing the testing. So they don't want to actually invoke the actual service. So if they don't want to do the actual invoke or actual service, you can basically do the mocking, right? Which solution will meet this requirement with the least operation overhead? Create an AWS Lambda function, use API gateway proxy integration to return constant HTTP response. Even if you do the proxy integration and but you are actually calling the actual AWS resource, right? Create an image to instance that serve the wrong. Customize the API gateway to select a response type based on the request. No. Use a request mapping template to select the mock integration. Yes, you can do the mock integration if you don't want to actually call the backend service, but you want to simulate the same for the testing purpose. You can mock it. So D is the correct answer. So that's it. That's the end of the video, and thank you.